Perfect. Perfect. All right. All right. First podcast. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Lisa, for joining. I was pretty excited when you said yes to this podcast, and I'm happy that this is the first episode of season 3 of Design Aloud. Let's jump right into it. I was quite curious from your LinkedIn profile. When you introduce yourself, you also mentioned that you wanted to explore technology and collaboration, but within a framework of how we can keep people more present and engaged with the physical world. I felt that line kind of made sense to me and I could relate to that. So, yeah, I think what we're going to talk about today is just of that small statement. So, yeah, how are you? How are you, Lisa?
Yeah, thanks for asking. And I am super honored to be your first podcast guest on the third season. So I'm doing great. I'm in Prague this week. So I'm really lucky to work with a team of designers here. So I'm working from the office, though normally I'm working from home. So definitely the remote office lifestyle is the world I typically live in. And as you know, usually based in Germany.
Hmm. And how is it in Prague? Are you there for just this week?
Yeah, I'll stay close to 2 weeks. It always gets so busy meeting everyone here in the office, and it's a fantastic city for those of you who have visited. I'm sure you already know this, but with our European summers where it's sunny until 10 o'clock in the evening, and of course Prague is so international with lots of tourists. There's just a really great energy and summer vibe happening here, so it's really nice.
That's amazing. It's so weird because Budapest has this kind of weird phase of weather right now. One day it's pretty cloudy and a bit cold, and then it's super sunny, and you just don't
Mm.
know what to wear. Sometimes it feels like the London weather. I've not been to London, but from what I've heard, just that you don't know what to wear. And
Ah,
it's like that right now.
yeah,
But yeah, looking forward to the summer. It's always fun and good to see people out and just enjoying the sun.
for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. And so, yeah, for our audience members, I would like you to introduce yourself without a name or a profession. How would you do that?
Yeah. Oh, that is such a tough question, but a fun one. I'd say the thing that's been happening that I notice that I do a lot and how I would introduce myself is I think I am the queen of customized emojis. So for those of you who use Slack, and usually you can put a thumbs up or a smiley face, and I know they have this in Teams and I'm sure some other products as well. But with Slack, there's a lot of fun you can have with finding sort of the right funny image or even taking a funny picture of a team member and using that as the emoji reaction. So that's how I would describe myself is I am the person who loves to add those little details that bring a little bit more joy and fun into the workplace. And yeah, I don't know. That makes me sound really unserious and that like I get paid to add Slack emojis. That it's not true. But anyway, that's how
But
I'm going to answer the question today.
it is fun. It is fun. Like it makes people laugh and just smile a bit. Do you have a favorite one?
Ooh, that is a good question. Actually, I do. So, my favorite one that someone else added, not me, that is really popular in our company right now is the rocket ship with two strong arm muscles. And so it's a combination of two different emojis. And so for me, it represents that we're doing amazing things with a lot of power and energy. And yeah, I'm using that emoji nonstop right now. So rocket ship with two strong arms coming out the sides.
That's
That's
good.
the best one. It's
That's a
called Muscle Rocket is the name of it.
muscle rocket.
Yeah.
Hey, that's a good one. Yeah, it kind of motivates also people.
Yes.
Yeah, for the listeners here, I met Lisa at one of our client projects with a company called Go Now, but it was
Mhm.
Log Me In before.
That's
And that's
right.
how I got to know Lisa. And yeah, I always felt like really good vibes with Lisa. She was the lead or head of research there, and it was always fun when we had our design meetings with the design folks, and it was always fun, and I felt super safe. I was just there for 3 months, and it was one of my best client projects ever. just because of the team members and how proactive and fun they were. Yeah. Do you want to add something, Lisa?
Yeah, no, it was a great time. And I don't remember all the details, but I think we were always like, how can we get Chimpy hired full time? You definitely stood out in your short time there. Yeah. And so just for context, I mean, I think the organization was probably close to 70 people at a certain point, and I did not lead the whole organization, but really lots of designers, researchers, writers, a really great group of people, and we were working super internationally. And so I think that was the biggest challenge of that job, is having team members all the way from California to the India time zone and everything in between, and kind of making design happen in a consistent way. And yeah, it was fun.
Yeah. It was pretty smooth, to be honest, and everybody was proactive and willing to help. That's something that I enjoyed a lot.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. And what are you doing at Prague? Do you want to talk a bit more about what you're doing right now?
Yeah, sure. So I joined I guess you would call it a scale up called Make. We actually have the domain make.com. I joined about a year ago to build and lead our product design organization. But when I'm talking about design, I'm also meaning that to include research and writing as well. And what do we work on? Make is a platform that allows people to connect their data together, no matter what apps they use. And so what does that mean exactly? It's a way to think about improving your workflow. So if you are someone who's using Slack and Gmail and Airtable, and you have lots of different information in lots of different places, Make allows you to transform and manipulate that data, automate it, so that you can do more. So let me give a specific UX use case to make it come to life a little bit more clearly. One of the researcher on my team, one of the things she did is she uses Make to add our customer list of the people she wants to recruit for studies.
Mhm.
And our automation tool then automatically contacts these customers, and then they can schedule themselves for a research session. And so this is in contrast to having to individually write and email each person, keep track of it manually on a spreadsheet. Make is allowing her to do this with automatic updates of these people were contacted, here's the status. And so it's a really great tool, and is for essentially any use case you can think of.
That's amazing. Yeah, it does make things a bit more easier, especially if you're sitting 8 hours or 10 hours a day in front of the desk, in front of your computer. I'm going off context here a bit, but I'm just wondering if there's an element of AI involved. Generative AI, I would say, not just AI. I feel like this is more or less AI, especially when it's a bit more complex workflow. But yeah, the opportunity and the market is really amazing now. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. So I feel like we can think about the word, AI sort of in two ways. I think there's the current very, very, very popular sort of chat GPT style AI of
Right.
how can this language learning model sort of interpret content and produce answers. And then the way I was listening to you talk about AI was more, I'll say, the human is driving sort of what the decision should be and what action should take place. So yeah, I think very much automation is more creative beyond just, hey, move this data from point A to point B. When I talk to customers, there's some really interesting use cases. And yeah, if I'll just share one more, and this is going to actually go back to the other use of AI, the chat GPT version. With podcasts right now, we're seeing some of our customers upload kind of their YouTube channels, or they're uploading the transcripts of their podcasts and using chat GPT to generate summaries and then post that into their YouTube channels. And so that's their sort of automated way using chat GPT to make the work of podcasting easier. So you can, focus on what you want to be doing, and not kind of the more labor intensive tasks that a computer is really good at.
Yeah, a lot of manual work is kind of minimized with these things. And
Mm.
yeah, if you can use it to your benefit, why not?
Mhm.
Yeah, two amazing case studies, actually. That's nice. So yeah, that's Make. And how did you get into design research? And what was your first job?
Yeah. So I guess I'm laughing a little bit. How many years back do we want to go? Like, do we really want to go back to
Yeah,
the
yeah.
beginning or start
The
or
first
start
first job ever.
that? Yeah, and we'll do kind of first professional job. Okay, so that puts me already in the university years. So that's still a long time ago, but a little bit more in the recent history. So yeah, so I was super lucky in that when I was going to university, there actually was programs in human computer interaction. So I am one of those people who sort of always knew that I liked this intersection between design, technology, and business. And HCI programs are a really good fit for people who really want to explore
Mhm.
many different topics. So I have a degree in kind of human computer interaction and information systems, which is a sort of a fancy way of talking about the discipline that's between business and computer science. So I'm really very multidisciplinary in my background. And when I was graduating, that was the first .com era. So I don't know if I want to say the year out loud, but let me just say that Amazon was still a very new service at the time. Amazon was only
Right.
4 years old at the time, just selling books and music. So I'm trying to set the scene of what it was like back in the wild, wild west when not everything was yet online. So this was an era of UX design where a lot of businesses needed their first websites and that they were very interested in selling things online, right? Because Amazon had such a good standard of what was possible. And so this is a long-winded way. My first job was a user interface designer at a agency in San Francisco in California, helping our clients build their first e-commerce websites. And
Wow.
so, yeah.
That's amazing though. I mean, I don't know if it's hard to think for me how that era felt like because everything was new and you probably felt a sense of being more creative and explorative. And when I think about the mindsets right now, it's completely standardized and patternized, and there's hardly any sense of original thinking, I would say. And even the course you mentioned, human computer interaction, I feel like 10 years back, there were still courses around that, but now the courses are more into UX, UI,
Mhm.
and it's more of how to learn Figma. I mean,
Mm.
I mean that's what I feel it has come down to. But that's amazing that you mentioned this, and yeah, I mean, I'd like to know more about this
Mhm.
mindset and how after your first job, how you're thinking towards building an interface or a experience changed.
Yeah. So thanks for that reflection. I'll start with your comment around, was it more creative because there weren't standards yet on
Mhm.
how people would use such systems, and a lot of people were not online yet, right? So, speaking of, you talked about being in the physical world. Yeah, newspapers were still a thing. We did not have mobile phones that had digital screens that you could use. Like you could just do SMS and phone calls. Well, of course, well, I can't remember to do that. And then probably not even that. We didn't even have that yet. So were we more creative? It's a good question. I don't know if I would say we were more creative. I would say I think we were often doubting ourselves on whether the designs we were creating was going to be successful or not. And I would say actually it was sort of trying to feel our way in the dark. And so a lot of the inspiration for design at that time was coming from print media. So magazine layouts and journalism, like these were sort of the first people coming into more or less web design or UI design at the time. And from an engineering or for a development point of view, yeah, the code was very limited. Like I still remember, like you would have an image file. So you can just imagine, I don't know, some kind of JPEG.
Mhm.
And like the engineer would have to like sort of cut up the image and like add hyperlinks underneath. Like it sounds super weird and crazy, but basically, yeah, we didn't have powerful design tools. We were using Photoshop or like kind of wireframing tools like Microsoft Visio. I mean, it's really crazy
Oh,
to
wow.
think about it. So like
Mhm.
we had no tool set beyond sort of what Adobe was offering. And then from an engineering perspective, the technology was not yet sophisticated enough to sort of have a great front end development. It was, yeah,
Mhm.
it was very limited. So I guess, so you're asking, were we more creative? I wouldn't say we were more creative. We were just trying to figure things out and hope
Right.
that humans could figure out what we were offering.
Mhm. And yeah, 2 points here. Like when I meant creative, I
Mm.
meant just in the brainstorming phase or just when you're ideating on things or thinking about things. I feel there's more room to explore than now, at least with the mindset.
Mm.
And also, how did you do research back then, and did you test things with people? How was the research phase like?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Super great questions. Yeah, I know we did some research because I can kind of remember, because actually like Jacob Nielsen's heuristics
Hmm.
were actually existing back then. So in some ways, design hasn't changed a lot, right? Like we still use those principles. Humans and our ability to process information or to need things full and clear, like things were the same X number of years ago as they were today.
Hmm.
So yeah, I do remember doing some research and using heuristic evaluation. Yeah, that's what it's called. And we
Yeah.
used heuristic evaluation. But what was funny at that time, and this is another thing where I think design hasn't changed that much, is that it's really hard to be the single designer on a team with product managers. They weren't called PMs back then. I don't know what their role was, but we'll say they were product managers and lead developers who have different opinions than you and want to build things differently no matter what you design. So that was the same back then, even with research results, as it
Oh,
sometimes
wow.
is in today's world.
Yeah, it does. It has not changed. You're right.
Well, but okay, but actually what I will say has changed is that I do think the sophistication and the knowledge level of non-designers having a design opinion
Mhm.
has improved, and that the quality of the feedback and the ability to be more of a equal thinking partner with a designer,
Right.
like that to me has actually changed for the better.
So you're saying at least the key stakeholders in the product team have a sense of UX and design, and they're much more mature
Correct.
than before.
Exactly. Yeah. Like I think the ability to recognize that, we have this thinking, we have user experience and we need to think about different people's contexts and their mindsets. There's more awareness of these topics in other stakeholders compared to when I first started.
Yeah, and this is something that I loved when I was working at LogMeIn,
Mhm.
Go2. Yeah, every engineer, every software developer, engineer, QA tester was very proactive in suggesting few ideas and mentioning that this is not the same as this might not work well. And that was really helpful. And at the end of 3 months, I kind of managed to have asynchronous collaborations or asynchronous workshops with them because they were that proactive and they were willing to make the design better.
Mhm.
So this is something that I enjoyed there. And yeah, I agree that the maturity has gone up. One counterpoint I would
Mhm.
say, especially for agencies, is to help the clients understand this level of maturity because it's completely different for businesses to understand this. And that's the main reason why they're coming to UX agencies or design agencies. And yeah, that's something that still needs to be thought through. And yeah, but I think we're going in a good direction overall.
Yeah. And that's a really tough power dynamic when a client has hired an agency.
Mhm.
And so they are essentially, paying for your time, for your work, and from an to maintain sort of your standards and your rationale for a particular design. When the client comes in and they said, Yeah, I don't really like that. Can you just, get rid of that one section and it'll be better?
Yeah.
And you know it's not better. And that I always people who work in agencies and the ability to the design skill is really not about creating a great design. That's actually the easiest part. The design skill is really how do you work with a client so that you are not forcing them to like that they feel that they understand why the design is so good and there's not sort of this battle of opinions. And that's really one of the most magical skills that I am still working on to this day. I do not have that skill. And yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, being a consultant or being able to sell what you're doing is it's a really great skill. And yeah, speaking of this business mindset, let's say you said
Mhm.
you had this interdisciplinary streams of design and science and business
Mhm.
and maybe psychology when you were
Mhm.
studying. Do you want to dive deeper on that? How business came into the picture?
Yeah. So for most of us, we are working for specific companies or in agency settings where we're trying to help the clients. And the business perspective is important because as designers or researchers, anyone in UX, you need to understand the motivations on why your offering will be successful in the market. So, I will say even today, I still struggle with some of the financial metrics. Like the craziest one is always EBITDA, like
Yeah,
earnings before income tax. I can barely remember what it means. But why it's important, or I think when I think about having a business mindset, what I think about is what can we as UX people do to balance out what we see as the best experience. And typically a lot of us are also working in settings where the what we're offering is intended to help someone accomplish a task or improve their ability to communicate, right? We have these very user-centered sort of jobs, if we're going to use jobs to be done as a talking point, job-centered tasks that we want to see happen within the product. But simultaneously, from a business perspective, we need to understand what's happening in the marketplace from a competitor point of view and what's happening perspective around who is the target audience
mhm,
and how do our designs help facilitate and support the right sort of persona or organization that match the business goals. So honestly, I mean, UX people need to be good at so many different thinking styles and contexts. So I guess to answer your question on where business comes in, I think most of us sort of really learn it in the context of where we're working, right? So I think generically reading books about management or what are the best metrics to measure a business, I think it's always hard to understand what that means until you're in the business itself.
right, right. And yeah, I've come across terms like the ROI of UX or the KPIs that you can measure to
Mhm.
make or to measure these things. And it's a very business oriented or financial oriented terms. And yeah, I feel like a lot of the people entering this field are not quite aware of this. And it's only when there's a sense of or a sense of leadership role or a management role you get to dig deeper into this metrics. Do you have any suggestions for the early adopters or the early UXers and how they can think about this or learn about
Mm. Mhm. Yeah. So, what I would recommend for people who are first coming into UX and want to build out their business perspective more is actually spending more time with the podcasts and blogs, all coming out of the product management discipline, right? Because product management is the discipline that's responsible for driving the business strategy through the development of the product. And
right,
so, you know, I think like UX, like what I mean by that in terms of like UX, the ways that product managers are pulling in multiple streams of information and channeling that into kind of key business decisions and priorities, you are going to have a much easier time working with your product managers if you understand sort of their key learnings and theories. So to be practical, so let me give your audience some clear examples. I'm sorry, I should have come prepared, but I think that one is Lenny's newsletter. So Lenny. That's a good one where someone who's really sharing sort of the latest thinking on how to do product management. There's Marty Kagan's book called Empowered. I'm hoping we can link this stuff in the show notes in case I get any of the names wrong. But yeah, kind of learning how your stakeholders think, especially the product managers, and then having a good sense of what are your developer buddies, what is the world they're dealing with. That is going to take you much further than just focusing only on how can I get better at UX design, or how can I get better at Figma? Sure, those are important as well, but you'll go much further by understanding PM and engineering.
Completely agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
It brings a whole new perspective into how you even think about solutions or how you discover problems. Yeah, I completely agree. And so this was at Carnegie Mellon, right? Where you studied these disciplines.
Yep, sorry for the long pause. Carnegie Mellon for undergraduate, and then University of Texas at Austin for my PhD.
What was the PhD about?
So it was about multitasking. And so you mentioned at the start of the podcast that you were intrigued by my byline around how can we keep people more engaged with the physical world. That really was sort of a thought that always was in my head during my dissertation, because we have to go back in time again. Okay, so the internet now more fully exists. E-commerce is normal. We are past the year 2000 now. But what's happening is, so when I started in Austin, Texas, we still really, so that yet we're not quite at modern times. And so what people did was you carried around your laptop, and there was kind of Wi-Fi. Like you sometimes had to stick in a device called like a PC MCIA card in order to have a.
We didn't have that back in India.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, and these are very US centric answers. But basically, in order to access it on the go, you were carrying around your laptop during that time. And of course, I was a student at that time, which this all felt very normal. And so what I studied at UT Austin was really a blend. Again, this is kind of a common theme with me: psychology, now bringing in some sociology. I continue to take classes in the business school. I wasn't doing so much with design during graduate school, but anyway, a lot of blending of different social sciences and business classes. And I got really interested in the fact that people just started to seem constantly distracted with their laptops in classroom settings. And again, this seems so strange now because it's completely normal that people are always glancing at their mobile phone, or people are doing something on their laptop. Like we don't even think that's weird anymore.
Yeah.
But I promise all of you, it was really weird when it first started to happen. And so I got really curious about whether are our brains kind of changing, and are social dynamics going to be ruined because people are constantly distracted, because now the internet is existing enough that there's stuff to do online. So again, back in the day, there wasn't really that much to do on the internet. You could read some web pages about some company, and celebrities were not on the internet yet. There wasn't Twitter. The internet was kind of boring. The physical world was still better. But anyway, so what I wanted to understand was what happens when we're sort of layering multiple levels of information as we're going about our everyday life. So I'm a student trying to listen to a classroom lecture, but I'm simultaneously starting to browse something else on a website, and maybe it's related to the lecture, maybe not. what's
Yeah.
happening here? Yeah. So what I did was I chose to study meeting settings, or business meetings, and what happens when people are supposed to be in a meeting room all together, and yeah, half the people seem like they're kind of tuned out and working on their laptops and doing something else. Like, is this going to be the fall of business? Like, like, will rocket ships, like, never be launched because we're just not capable of
Okay.
listening to each other, and everything's gonna, go crazy. No, it's not. It's fine. Yeah. The funny part for my dissertation is, of course, I had all these big ideas on how
Mhm.
much being distracted would sort of hurt, or, these were my hypotheses that this would be deeply negative.
Right.
What we found is that as humans, we find ways to accommodate for our distracted colleagues. And so, what I mean by this is, no, everything's fine. Like, what I mean by this is everything's fine when people start to multitask. So, yes, they do misinformation. Yes, sometimes people do find it rude and slightly annoying.
Mhm.
But especially for business meetings, you're going to get this same content at a later point through a different channel, right? Someone may send meeting notes, or you'll have more conversations. So I was a little bit disappointed to find that I didn't have some like major discovery that all of humanity was going to disappear because we were multitasking. I found that humans are very accommodating and figured out workarounds to help each other out in this
Mhm.
distracted state.
Yeah, that's a very interesting assumption and premise. Did you find this switch because of a geographical reason, or was it based on just the context of going to a university and just finding people with their laptops, or what was the context like there?
Yeah. So for my field site, in terms of like where I actually, let's say did data collection and was doing measurements, I was lucky enough, or actually it took me a long time to recruit two different companies who would let me come in and observe their meetings. And I literally followed a couple different employees all day. And I was sort of writing down timestamps of like, from 8 in the morning, they're working at their computer doing this, and then they go into a meeting. And here it's called microethnography, when you start to look at the tiny little movements and gestures that people have, or sort of where their eyes are looking in any given moment. So I was using microethnographic techniques, it sounds very fancy, to analyze behavior. And then I paired that with a large quantitative survey to have a more robust data set. So the survey, yeah, my sample was people who were professionals in the working world. Yeah.
Amazing. Did you notice any behavioral changes because of this?
Yeah, not during my dissertation time, but what I would say I notice these days, and of course, this is the classic n equals one. I'm talking about it about myself.
Uh-huh.
I noticed that my attention span is terrible, right? So I don't know how it is for you, but if someone sends a YouTube video and if it is longer than 1 minute or 2 minutes,
Mhm.
it feels like such an effort to click play and watch it straight through. So I do wonder, and I have not studied this, but I do wonder if our expectations, or my expectations anyway, have really shifted, and there's an expectation that content is very quick and short, TikTok style, that everything is designed to be consumed at a glance. It's almost like design has changed to know that people are so distracted, and the only way to communicate with them or to get your message across, it has to be short. I don't
Right.
know. What do you think on this topic? I'm
No, I
super
agree.
curious.
I completely agree. I feel like it's the world has become a bit more faster. When you spoke about the internet device that you stick to the laptop, it kind of reminded me of the DSL modem
Hmm.
systems that we had back in India, and it used to take around 3-4 hours to download just one song.
Yeah.
And we had that patience to wait for 3-4 hours, and we just went about doing our own things on the side. And sometimes we left the computer on overnight just to download some songs that we could
Hmm.
listen to. And that was our very happy moment, let's say, when you finish when you see the download finished and you can listen to it. But now, when the moment your phone says phone turns from 5G or 4G to 2G, when you go to a remote place or when there's no bars, signals, you just kind of go into panic mode and you just don't know what to do. And it's so weird. I can naturally see this shift in being more impatient
Hmm.
with a lot of things. I feel we don't enjoy the outside world too much, and there's plenty of stuff to enjoy. And I read this really nice book. It's called Wrapped Attention. I think it's by Wilfred Gallagher, or
Mm.
I might be saying the name wrong, but yeah, it talks a lot about this, about ADHD, about the environmental context of attention, the cultural context of attention, how you are paying attention in relationships, and how you are paying attention to things online, especially for people who work 8 hours a day. And it's pretty interesting, and I kind of agree with your hypothesis and your premise that it is going in the wrong direction. I feel we are not as focused as before. There's a lot of distractions, and it's hard to focus on one thing at a time. And yeah, I completely agree with the hypothesis. And I don't know why it's you feel negated about that, but yeah, that's my thoughts on this.
Yeah, and I don't know if you've seen any articles related to this topic, but I've seen some that are like, "Hey, the young people of today, Gen Z is, I guess, some people call them, they are specifically wanting kind of dumb phones or phone not no fancy iPhones or fancy Androids, so that they can minimize distraction and be more in the moment." Like, people, I think, are really starting to push back against this always on, who put the like on my latest post, right? Like, this is
Right.
just really distracting for our minds. And I am definitely guilty of kind of exhibiting all those behaviors. Like, I notice it in myself and I'm
Mhm.
like, how did I live before sort of this? Basically, are you ever bored anymore? Right? Like, like it
Yeah.
used to be that you would just have to, like, if there was nothing to do, you just had to sit with your own thoughts
Yes.
and just, you know,
Yeah.
wait until the event of, whatever thing was supposed to happen next. And now
Yeah.
it's like constantly there's something.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like folks read less more now. Folks don't spend time outside anymore. Just sitting, like you said. I feel like boredom is such a nice thing. People
Mhm.
feel obligated to just keep doing something at every moment, even if it's just scrolling meaninglessly over Instagram or Facebook. Yeah, I feel that's a wrong way to go about doing things. I mean, we were talking about this yesterday with my colleagues. Apple, for example, has created this sort of notification system in the early 2000s or 2010s. I'm not sure. But that kind of triggered this mentality of what's happening, what notifications did I get? People just keep lifting their phones just to check if they got any notifications. And then now they've reintroduced this do not disturb mode or this
Mhm.
focus. I feel it's pretty counterintuitive and just solving for things that didn't exist or that's man-made now. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I have weird feelings about this, but like you said, people are getting used to it. Human beings are getting adapted to it. Babies are getting adapted to watching YouTube kids on
Mhm.
while eating, which I feel is completely wrong because you want to enjoy food with your family or friends, or even when you're alone, just enjoy the food. Feel that's kind of going away because of tech and the sense of notifications. So yeah, it's I feel it's going in the wrong direction, and I'm very extreme about it. I have a really strong opinion about it.
Mhm.
But yeah, it is the current state of affairs, and it's the reality now.
Yeah. But I'll say, on the positive, I think it's very much okay and accepted when people say, like, "Hey, I'm going offline. I don't, like, or I don't check messages on the weekend." So I will say, from a societal perspective, I appreciate that. Like, it's
Yeah.
it's normal and considered okay to be offline.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm.
yeah. The meeting fatigues and all these things post corona. Yeah, that's a really positive sign that you can just say, I don't want to turn on my camera. I'm doing my thing. I'm here to chat. That's it.
Mhm.
And that's really good. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's amazing. So
But if
yeah.
I want to, yeah, so I'm sorry, that it just sparked a thought in my head because it relates to thinking about design and kind of what is our responsibility as designers, like kind of big ethical question in terms of, and this relates also to business. What
Mhm.
do we think about? I don't want to call it necessarily dark patterns, but a lot of the work we do is about keeping people engaged and using our systems. And I don't know, I don't have a very well developed perspective on this topic, but it's something that's always in the back of my mind, which is what is this balance in the work we do of helping promote sort of great experiences? And yeah, we want people to use our product,
Mhm.
but at the same time, like maybe it's too much, right? Like sort of all these nice little tips and tricks, and we want you to see this feature, and here's more things in our product. Like, what
Yeah.
is our responsibility to help keep a balance for all human beings? It's a big
Mhm.
question.
It is. It is. I've thought about this, and yeah, I'm not well read with these things, to be honest. But we were doing an inclusive workshop with our colleagues, and one of the examples was, let's say, a person named Matthew. He's 17 years old, and he has autism, and he's afraid of, or is socially anxious, and he's not like stable enough to go and pay for himself in a Starbucks, let's say. And how do you design an experience for people like Matthew? That's something that I would consider as a positive way of contributing to society in terms of design. But for folks like who want to be influencers, the majority of influencers, let's say, it's just, I mean, if they're happy and if they're doing good, fine. But sometimes it goes beyond a point of just mindless scrolling over Instagram, and it's of no use to your own personal value system and life. And I don't know where to stop this, or I don't know how we can, as designers and researchers, stop this. Yeah, because everybody has their own individual way of looking at things, and one should appreciate that and respect that. And if if there's a standardization or a control, it should be for everybody and not just for a certain section of people.
Mhm.
So it's, I don't know, I don't see a balance there, and I feel like what we're doing is what needs to happen right now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's such a big, complex question.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, I'm enjoying our conversation because I'm like, oh, but what if, like, when we're interviewing people, what if we started to just kind of ask more about like how do you maintain focus during your day, right? Actually, so and what I'm saying by that is helping sort of raise awareness of these issues by sort of asking about it and helping people of course, letting them decide what's right for themselves, but just kind of sparking an awareness on this
Yes.
topic. I think that's something any of us can do.
Yes, I agree. And I think that's something that's happening with a lot of topics under inclusive design, with accessibility and disability. I feel like that's become more, I wouldn't say a trend, but it's becoming aware now. People are getting aware of these things. And yeah, even focus, mental health, how it affects your daily life, how it affects your sleep, especially how it affects your the way you talk to people. These are really major factors in your social interactions. And yeah, talking about these things help, but at the same time it feels a bit wrong to talk about these things without having proper understanding of it, or
Mhm.
proper knowledge of it, because there's like 100 consequences that lead to different things once you bring this up. So yeah, it should definitely come from people, from practiced professionals and people who are specialized in these things. And it's a really interesting way to integrate design with them,
Mhm.
psychologists or psychiatrists, and just understand this more and how we can design for these experiences more. I think that's a really good way to look at it. What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I love the idea of how do we design for calmness, right? So we're used to designing for engagement or design to accomplish a task. What would it mean to take the product or service that any of us work on and build something that creates
Yeah,
calmness? And I don't know what that would be, but that's my design prompt for the audience to think about.
that, that's amazing. That's
Mhm.
amazing. Yeah, and yeah, I wouldn't. Yeah, the moment you said design for calmness, I thought about Headspace and all these things, all these apps. But yeah, I wouldn't go in that direction at all.
Yeah, and I don't mean a separate app. I
Yeah,
mean in the thing you work on
yeah, yeah,
today.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's a good addition to this.
Mhm.
Amazing. Yeah, we talked about certain trends and how it was
Mhm.
back then and how it is now. And you also mentioned that you did this, was it microethnographic? Yeah,
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 microethnography. Yep.
microethnography. And is that how you got introduced to research, or was there UX research back then? How was it like?
Yeah, great question. So there, hold on. It's funny, but when I first started in the UX field, I don't specifically remember UX research roles, but now that I'm thinking about it more, there were certainly, it was called usability analyst. So
Hmm.
there were usability roles, or sometimes actually it was even called human factors. So this is linking back honestly to the 1950s. And no, I was not alive in the 1950s when people had to design like airplane cockpits or really complex like telephone systems. And so really actually the study of like how do people know what button to push in which particular situation. Honestly, it's been around for well before sort of UX was even a thing. I think that research came before design. But yeah, in terms of sort of how I got into research, certainly my skills were improved by going to graduate school where, yeah, I learned survey techniques and interviewing techniques, though, of course, many people can also learn these same things on the job. And yeah, I enjoy sort of, yeah, getting to think deeply about certain topics and knowing people's stories. I think what's funny is you'll often find that many people who are researchers were actually like a little bit shy. I'll say, again, I'll speak for myself. I'm actually quite shy and don't like to kind of share about myself, but I love hearing other people's
Right.
stories. And research is a great way to connect to people because people really love to share their story. And
Mhm.
sometimes, even when they're getting paid for it, it makes it even better.
Right.
But yeah, so I did research in graduate school. And then after I finished graduate school, I don't know, I was like, should I share this story? I will share this story. It was really actually hard to get my first UX job after graduate school. So
Mhm.
previously, when we've been talking, I was like, yeah, I had this university degree. I got my first design job in San Francisco, like super smooth.
Mhm.
It's so awesome, so cool. Wow. May your audience never make the mistake I did, which was spend a really long time in graduate school. So long, 8 years, that your skills are quite out of practice and you don't really seem like you know what's going on with the latest trends and what the industry is up to. So
Wow.
I actually had a
Mhm.
really hard time getting my first UX job after I finished my PhD because
Right.
I was kind of overtrained from an academic perspective and then simultaneously very out of touch with sort of how things were happening in the business world
Mhm.
and what was happening in UX. So, yeah, that was fun.
That must have been a very interesting phase to. Did you manage to learn these skill sets, or how was it like? How did you end up bridging that gap?
Yeah. So that is a great question. So how did I come out of sort of that rut, which I know is, and I don't, rut sounds negative. So how did I come out of that situation? For me, it was a lot of persistence and being very open to any opportunity. And what that means is I was still living in the United States at that time. I basically kept applying for any job that was UX related and I got out of hundreds and hundreds of applications, only one job offer. It was in a completely different state, and this is before remote work, right? So I had to move to a city. In some ways, the job was kind of amazing in the sense of I lucked out, and it was for a huge company. It was for Nokia, the mobile phone company.
Right.
But it actually, well, I miss all the people I got to work with, but we weren't on the most prestigious product line. So it was a very narrowly scoped job. We weren't like designing the cool Nokia phones. We were making some customizations for telecoms, which means you take some requirements and you make a few adjustments, and that's the design update you give, right? So a very narrowly scoped design job. But the key message in this story, and I was only at that job for a year because Nokia was starting to have some business problems. The iPhone is starting, and Android is really becoming a thing. But the key takeaway from that story is it's easier to get a job once you have a job. And so even though I kind of knew that, like, yeah, Nokia seems cool on the surface, but this job is really not that great from a learning perspective, and the company's not doing super great. Having that foot in the door of like, but from an outsider perspective, from someone who's just glancing at my resume, it looked much better than the reality was. And so from that, I was able to get a job with Intel, which was really the most amazing job I've ever had as an individual contributor. Like, just a fantastic group of anthropologists, designers, and technologists, all really thinking about like, how can people use computers in the future? And really a supportive group of mentors. I still talk to many of those same colleagues today. Like,
that's amazing.
Yeah. So I guess I'm trying to give the audience hope that even when you feel like, who's going to hire me, like, take this job that you can get that's more or less in the right topic space, and keep working at it. Good things will come.
Amazing. Yeah, we have a saying in India which basically translates to just starting trouble, because a lot of the bikes before, they never we had a kickstart system, and it was always difficult to kickstart the bike, but once you kickstart, it just runs.
Yeah.
That's the kind of saying that we had, and I totally get what you mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that story. It's an amazing story. Yeah, so amazing. So you got off into research through Nokia and then Intel, and what happened next? Do you want to? Yeah, I think we covered the thesis topic, and which is what the main highlight of this podcast was going to be about. And I wanted to title this "Physically Present, Mentally Absent," and I think we spoke about that in length. We had some really nice ideas bouncing off each other, and that brings me to a follow-up question of how are we designing for the modern work environment? Have you thought about this, and how is it at Make right now? We spoke about research in length and how you ended up from Nokia to Intel, and you shared a really good story about your early experiences. So thank you for that. And I was wondering if what we spoke about earlier about being physically present and mentally absent, the ideas that we bounced off each other, I was wondering if we are in a phase, or we are in a place where we are able to design for modern environment. By modern environment, I mean a very distracting environment where users are having multiple tabs open, and how do we design and research for that? And yeah, I was wanting to understand if you had some ideas on that, if you're doing something on that right now at Make. Yeah.
Cool. Great question. So I think one of the sort of natural thinking traps that all of us get into when we're working on our specific product or service is we think that the user or customer is just using our product or our service and really focused deeply on, everything and the buttons. And of course, when you're doing some usability studies or some interviews, right, we sort of tend to put these blinders up and just focus only on our product, because that's what we as the team care about most. And so one of the things I would certainly say that I always try and do in my own studies and when I'm working with other researchers or designers is really encourage everyone to think about the full context of people's work environment. And that actually does even bring us back to the physical world. So not only are people not just using they are also surrounded in a physical environment, even in remote work in their home office.
Right.
And how do sort of the material objects of the built environment, that's a fancy way of just saying books, furniture, kids, pets, what is that doing to the experience? And just to have that in mind. And so, you know, I know you would probably push on me and ask a follow-up question of like, well, what would we design differently, kind of knowing about all those things? Like, how is it helpful to know that, yeah, someone may have like a dog or a cat running around?
Yeah.
It's not a direct connection, but it's really about being an extremely strong worldview about different people in their situations. And, you know, one of the most, I'm going to steal someone else's story, but I really like it, was, and actually relates to Nokia and it relates to India. There was a really fantastic design and research team. And what they noticed is that in the city where they were studying mobile phone use in these villages in India, often floods and people had to literally hold the phone up on the wall, right? And so this is, for most of us, probably we won't be designing an experience that where someone might be in a flooded situation, but this starts to tie into accessibility and inclusiveness. There are other things happening that we should take into consideration. And so maybe it's not a hook on the wall, but there's going to be something else to think about. And so my key point here is it's all important, and it's the designer and the researcher, the UX person, to synthesize that worldview, to build that world, understand it deeply, and then determine what would be the design for it.
Yeah, I agree. And another example that I could think of is the let's say the light versions of Facebook or Instagram, because in most, and this study was in India as well, and in most remote parts they found that there's hardly any usage of Facebook or Instagram, and they understood that it was because the connection there, the internet connectivity, is really bad or poor there, and it runs only on 2G. So to optimize for 2G bandwidths, they made a lighter version of the applications which could run on 2G. And yeah, this is again a really brilliant point on being inclusive and thinking about these exclusions and digging deeper and finding, you might not essentially build the best experience out there, but it's really worth to think about. It's really worth to think about these exclusions. And yeah, things come up. There's two completely unrelated dots that you can connect through thinking about these things, which make the experiences better. So I completely agree with the point that you made there about being inclusive and thinking about accessibility. So yeah, interesting. And how is it working at Make now that you've shifted roles?
Yeah, so with Make, let's see. So I wouldn't have I shifted. Sorry. With Make, so I'm still working as sort of a UX manager or UX leader. I got to do that at LogMeIn/GoTo as well. So that part feels really similar. What I would say is different, or what I'm really enjoying learning about, is actually important for all designers and gets back to the same topic of people aren't just using your experience. With Make, people are connecting many different systems, integrating many different tools. And so even, you know, if someone is just using, like we're using Google Meet to talk right now, can integrate with other services, right? Or if we think about our Chrome browser and all these plugins, I think one of the most interesting sort of design areas for not only here at Make, but any designer who's working on, I'll say, SaaS products or think information that lives in the cloud. How do you start to think about the additional services or integrations that your customers want to connect into, because products that we're designing as standalone are starting not to be standalone anymore, right? So I think Airtable is a great example of a tool that has awesome integrations into other services. Yeah, and Make, again, is as a platform that's just focused on integrating things. And it starts to be important for designers and researchers to understand basically the language of API, so application programming interface. I think I said that wrong, but these are the code bases, are the ways that to access the data across these different systems. And
Right.
so,
Yeah.
sorry, I think I went off on a tangent.
No,
More interesting every year.
no, it's kind of a similar context to what we spoke earlier. And I also feel that it's not just about the APIs or two different applications business wise connecting to each other, but rather about how users who use these two applications connect these two things. That's a really great point. Yeah, the experience kind of matters because it's different personas for two different applications, and then you have to connect these two, and it's a whole complex network that you need to deal with, which is very interesting. Hard to think right now, but I think it's a really good way to brainstorm and come up with really cool ideas there.
Yeah, can I just build on that? So sorry, that sparked an idea with me. So what that makes me think about is the fact that as designers or UX people, we like to think we are designing a specific experience or a specific workflow.
Mhm.
But in today's world, with these connected systems, these integrated systems, users are deciding for themselves, or customers are deciding for themselves
Mhm.
the experience should be. And I think that's a really interesting shift. Whereas, yeah, we think we're delivering this experience, this layout, and this is the way the buttons are supposed to be clicked for this goal. I mean, yes, that's
Yeah.
part of it, but more is happening on top. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah, a lot more freedom has been given to the users' hands, and it's good. I think it's good. Customization is good always, and if it makes your life easier, then why not? Yeah, that was make.com, and it's do you want to talk about this whole space of no code and low code space? I figure it's make kind of revolves around domain. You want to talk
Yeah.
on that?
Yeah, I really enjoy. So let's, I guess, maybe define no code and low code. This is shorthand or sort of a phrasing for giving people the ability to create systems online without having to use code, like without having to be a programmer. And sometimes you might hear this being called like citizen developer as well. There's some other ways to think about the way no code, low code is positioned.
Mhm.
And like many things, and I think another sub-recurring theme of this in some ways has been around for a while. So, and what I mean by that is if you think about kind of website builders, so kind of what you see is what you get editor. I don't know if people know the acronym WYSIWYG, what you see is what you get. But right, this was 80s, 90s, that you could just take different visual objects and put them together to site, let's say, right? This is, so sorry, we should jump ahead in the timeline schedule media in Dreamweaver. So this has been around, but what I would say is different about no code, low code is that these experiences that people can build are more interactive. And so whereas website builders back in the day was just like, hey, we're going to help you with templates and please add your static content. Like, yes, that is helping people build a system without having to be a programmer. But no code, low code tools like Make and others are actually letting people process data from websites and update different systems. It actually becomes a way to build a fully working system. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
And yeah.
a point. Yeah, it's a bit more dynamic, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite an ethos. Like no code, low code is like super popular in France. Like there's a whole Slack group all in French of just enthusiasts on this topic. It's like it's a subculture, just like how people love anime or heavy metal music. Like
Oh, wow.
it's a thing.
Pretty interesting. I wonder
Yeah.
why just France? Is there a reason?
Yeah. It's not just France, but definitely France stands out as, yeah, there's a huge community there.
What's the one, I would say, value proposition or one statement to for people to use make.com?
Yeah.
Sorry for
So
putting you on blast.
no. I love that. And thank you for letting me talk about one of my favorite products because, of course, I am biased. So, by the way, we have a free version of the product. You don't have to add a credit card number. So, please go check it out. But, okay,
Yeah.
why should you check it out? What is really great about Make and what I even hear when I talk to customers is that it is a creative tool for connecting their data. And let me explain what that means. Probably with like FigJam or Miro whiteboarding tools that let you start to connect together different elements and sort of create systems or idea or organize your thoughts. Make is the same in the sense of it is an infinite canvas for you to move your data around these different systems. And so it uses a lot of colorful bubbles and some subtle animations. And we really want it to be playful and almost feel like a video game experience in some ways, but you're really solving real business problems and smoothing out your workflow. So if nothing else, even if you're not interested in automations, like sign up for an account just to play with Make. It is really a lot of fun. And then when you actually create your automation, you'll feel even better about it.
That's amazing. Do you have an automated, I don't know how you call it, but like a task or automated module that you have from Make that you recommend?
It depends what you want to do. So literally we have what are called connectors, or another way to say it is the different apps that you can integrate into Make. One of my team members recently, he was using Spotify and he wanted to automate kind of songs that he was adding this year into a specific type of playlist. So yeah, if you use Spotify, you can
That's amazing.
start to kind of build your own experience with playlists using Make. So that's a good one.
That's a really good one for DJs and people interested in music or who are the resident DJs for every house parties. I think this is really useful.
Yeah, and you can imagine, so someone could build an automation of, I don't know, like every time I'm on YouTube, and if I click like save this on YouTube, take that song title and that song name, find it on Spotify and create a Spotify playlist. Like you could build that automation.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah, thank you for that. Cool. I think we've reached the end.
Yeah. That was fun. Yeah. I think you did quite a great job of taking this conversation in many different directions, but like keeping a cohesive thread.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, I really enjoyed the conversation. I know we touched a lot of things that were out of context, I would say, but yeah, I felt we bounced off some really cool ideas, and it's also good for the listeners to think about these ideas. And if you can, just share it with us. Connect with Lisa on LinkedIn. How do you want them to connect with you?
Yeah, LinkedIn is best. I'm not super great with the socials. I mean, I think like Twitter is probably not, something that any of us should be using right now. And Mastodon's too confusing. So yeah, find me on LinkedIn.
LinkedIn. I'll tag all of the links in the description. You can connect with Lisa. So thank you so much, Lisa, for having a chat. I really enjoyed the conversation. And yes, thank you for your proactiveness and saying yes to this. It's amazing to connect back with you. Hopefully, we can catch up in Prague or in Germany and have a coffee and talk about design.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chimpy. This was great.
Thank you so much. Oh, it's been so long since someone called me Chimpy.
I didn't, yeah, I wasn't sure. you should have cut.
No, it's fine.
Thank you, Kartik. It's been great.
No, it's fine. Yeah, I like being called Chimpy. Chimpy is good. But yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Lisa.